They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but what if a single photo could cost a life? When Zara pressed post on that wedding photo, she wasn't sharing a secret, she was sharing her joy. Yet, in less than an hour, that moment of happiness sparked a violent storm. Her husband, the man she thought was her soulmate, would rather destroy her life than let the world see his face. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you ignored every warning, every inconsistency, because you desperately wanted to believe in them? Why would a husband, just 24 hours after saying, "I do," choose to silence his wife forever, all because of a single Facebook post? The answer isn't just chilling, it's unthinkable. This isn't merely a story of betrayal. It's a stark reminder that trust can be the most dangerous thing you'll ever give someone. Before you share your life with the world, before you silence that small voice of doubt, ask yourself, what might they be hiding? By the end of this story, you'll understand why that question might save your life. Let's go back to where it all began, to the moment love and lies collided. Welcome to Crime Wave Stories HQ. I thank you, my viewers, most especially my subscribers, for your support as we keep improving and bringing daily told and untold true crime stories update. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. She was known for her warmth, the kind of person whose laughter could fill a room and whose social media feed painted a life of quiet strength and hope. Zara, a 52-year-old woman, had endured more heartbreak than most, failed relationships, broken promises, and the lingering weight of loneliness. Yet, despite everything, she never let go of her belief that love could still find her. For years, she watched friends share their wedding photos and anniversary celebrations online. She cheered them on while silently wondering if that kind of joy would ever be hers. Then came a trip that changed everything, a spontaneous vacation to Mexico. Zara booked it on a whim, hoping for a change of scenery and a chance to reset her life. What she didn't expect was to meet someone who seemed to bring that unshakable hope back into focus. He appeared as if from a dream, handsome, charismatic, and attentive in ways that made her feel seen. His name was Javier, and he had a smile that felt sincere, the kind of presence that could make someone believe they were the only person in the room. But there was something else about him. He was quiet, a little too private, but in a way that felt intriguing rather than concerning. They met at the resort's poolside bar, where the air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and a fresh sea breeze. Zara had been sitting alone, soaking in the sunset, when Javier struck up a conversation. He asked about her life, listened intently, and made her laugh, a rare kind of laughter that comes after months of silence. By the end of their conversation, she knew she wanted to see him again, and he seemed equally eager to stay by her side. For the rest of the trip, they were inseparable. They explored local markets, shared dinners beneath the stars, and danced to live music as the waves crashed in the distance. When the vacation ended, their connection didn't. They exchanged numbers, made promises to keep in touch, and followed through. What began as daily texts quickly turned into late-night phone calls that stretched into the early morning. Their bond grew stronger with every conversation, even though they were separated by thousands of miles. But as much as their romance blossomed, there were pieces of Javier that Zara never fully understood. He spoke very little about his past, offering only vague mentions of bad luck and an insistence that he was ready to move forward. Zara asked questions about his family and childhood, but his answers were always brief, as if those parts of his life were irrelevant now. He also made one thing abundantly clear: he hated social media. He told her it was a toxic place filled with people who thrived on bringing others down. Javier believed in keeping his life private and only sharing meaningful moments with those closest to him. For someone like Zara, who loved posting photos of her travels and daily musings, this was a stark contrast. Her online presence was her way of staying connected to friends and family, of sharing her joys and lessons learned. She believed that happiness, when shared, could inspire others. At first, she struggled to understand his perspective, but love makes us compromise. Zara reasoned that everyone has their boundaries, and this was his. She convinced herself that respecting his privacy was a small price to pay for a relationship that made her feel alive. Still, there were moments that left her unsettled. When she asked to take pictures together, Javier often found excuses to avoid it. "Let's live in the moment," he'd say with a charming grin. Or, "We don't need photos to remember this." Sometimes, she'd catch him staring off into the distance, as though his mind was far away. But when she asked what he was thinking, he'd wave it off with a laugh. Despite the unanswered questions, Zara clung to what she thought they had, a real chance at happiness. Their love story unfolded like a fairy tale, fast, passionate, and full of promise. From the moment they met in Mexico, everything about their relationship felt like a whirlwind of emotions she had only dreamed of. Months later, Javier proposed. It wasn't an elaborate spectacle, but an intimate, heartfelt moment. He took Zara on a surprise weekend getaway, just the two of them, to a cozy cabin by a pristine lake. There, under a blanket of stars, he knelt down and asked her to be his forever. Zara said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face as she was overwhelmed with gratitude that love had finally found her. Even in the midst of this joy, Javier's boundaries remained firm. Zara had imagined announcing their engagement to the world, sharing pictures of her ring, and basking in the congratulations of friends and family online. Yet, when she brought it up, he gently reminded her of his feelings about social media. "I'd rather keep this between us," he said with a smile. "Our love is special, and I don't want it diluted by people who don't understand it." Though it stung, Zara respected his wishes. She convinced herself that what mattered wasn't the likes or comments, but the man she was about to marry. And so, their engagement remained a private celebration, known only to their closest circle. As the wedding day approached, Zara's excitement grew. She had spent years attending weddings as a guest, quietly wishing she could be the one walking down the aisle. Now, her turn had finally come. She poured her heart into planning an intimate ceremony, a gathering of close family and friends that reflected the simplicity and sincerity of their love. The venue was a charming chapel adorned with fresh flowers, their fragrance filling the air as soft music played in the background. The guest list was limited to those who had been there for Zara through life's ups and downs. For her, it wasn't about the size of the crowd but the depth of connection she shared with those present. On the big day, she looked radiant in her white gown, the train flowing behind her as she walked toward the man she believed was her forever. The look in Javier's eyes as he watched her approach made her heart swell with joy. The ceremony was beautiful, vows exchanged with trembling voices, promises sealed with a kiss, and applause that echoed through the chapel. It was everything Zara had hoped for, yet a part of her wished she could capture the moment and share it with the world. As the newlyweds stepped out of the chapel into a shower of rose petals, Zara instinctively reached for her phone, eager to snap a picture. But Javier stopped her with a gentle touch on her arm. "Let's keep this just for us," he whispered. She hesitated but then nodded, smiling as she put the phone away. Their reception was equally intimate, a candlelit dinner with heartfelt toasts, laughter, and a quiet first dance under twinkling lights. It was the kind of night Zara had always dreamed of. But through it all, the absence of photographs and posts felt strange. Friends and family asked if she would share the pictures later, and she assured them she would. Deep down, however, she knew she wouldn't. For Javier, privacy was paramount. For Zara, love meant compromise. She told herself that a relationship wasn't about public displays but the quiet moments they shared when no one else was watching. As they left the reception hand in hand, heading toward their honeymoon destination, Zara believed with all her heart that she had made the right choice. But the cracks in their picture-perfect story were already beginning to form. And soon, the love she thought would last forever would lead to an outcome she could never have imagined. The honeymoon was picture-perfect. The ocean stretched endlessly, its waves lapping gently at the shore, and the air was filled with the scent of salt and blooming flowers. Their suite overlooked the water, with large windows letting in the morning sun that spilled golden light across the room. Zara woke up slowly, savoring the quiet joy of the moment, the man she loved sleeping peacefully beside her. She turned toward Javier, watching him for a while, overcome with gratitude. This was everything she had dreamed of. He was the man who had reignited the part of her that once felt lost. she had said. I do. To a future she believed would be filled with endless joy and companionship. As he slept, Zara reached for her phone. It wasn't about showing off, it was about sharing her joy. Her happiness felt too big to keep to herself. She felt an overwhelming urge to let the world know that after all the heartbreak and loneliness, she had found love again. Scrolling through her photos, Zara paused at a candid shot taken by one of their guests. In it they looked so happy, their smiles wide and genuine. For a moment, she hesitated, recalling Javier's words about privacy. But this wasn't about violating his trust, it was about celebrating a life-changing moment. She selected the photo, added a simple caption, "Forever begins now," and hit post. She placed the phone back on the nightstand and leaned back into the pillows, smiling to herself. The sound of waves outside their window lulled her into a sense of peace. Javier stirred beside her, his eyes fluttering open. He smiled sleepily at her, and she felt her heart swell. But that smile faded the moment he noticed her phone lighting up with notifications. He sat up abruptly, his expression shifting to something darker. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice unnervingly calm. Zara's stomach nodded. "I just posted a photo. It was nothing, just us at the wedding." His jaw tightened as he reached for her phone. Scrolling through the post, he turned the screen toward her, his eyes blazing. "Do you know what you've done?" he demanded. Confused and startled by his reaction, Zara stammered. "It's just a picture, Javier. What's the big deal?" His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "You don't understand. You've put us both in danger." The weight of his words made her chest tighten. "Danger? What are you talking about?" Javier stood, pacing the room as his demeanor shifted from calm to panicked. "You should have listened to me, Zara. I told you to keep this private." Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of his sudden outburst. "Who's going to care about a wedding photo? It's just our friends and family." "No!" he interrupted, slamming his fist on the dresser. Zara flinched, fear creeping into her heart. "It's not just friends and family. You don't know who's watching. I told you I don't like my pictures on social media. Take it down," he shouted. Her expression shifted from confusion to hurt. "It's our wedding picture," she said firmly. "This is my life, too. I can decide what I want to share." Her refusal only heightened his panic. The stakes were too high for her to resist now. His cover was slipping, and every second that post remained online was another step toward everything unraveling. For Zara, it was a simple celebration of love. For Javier, it was a ticking time bomb that could destroy everything he had hidden. And as her refusal stood firm, something in him snapped. For a man with so much to lose, even love wasn't worth exposure. He stood there in their honeymoon suite in Santorini, staring at her with an intensity she had never seen before. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he clenched his phone in one hand and pointed at hers with the other. "Delete it," he said, his voice low but trembling with barely restrained anger. Zara blinked, confused by the sudden shift in his demeanor. "What?" she asked softly, still trying to process the demand. "I said delete the post," Javier repeated, louder this time, the calm and affectionate tone she was used to nowhere to be found. Her smile faltered as she sat up straighter. "Why? It's just a picture of us. I was happy." He took a step closer, his face tightening. "I told you before, I don't want our life on social media. Why is that so hard for you to understand?" She stared at him, hurt flashing in her eyes. "It's not about you. It's about me. I've waited my whole life for this moment. I've shared everything else, my struggles, my triumphs, and now I can't share this? The happiest day of my life." His jaw tightened as he listened, but her words didn't ease his anger. Instead, they made his fear more real. His mind raced with the implications. What if someone had already recognized him? What if everything came crashing down because of a single post? "It's not about happiness," he snapped. "You don't get it. Just delete it." Zara pushed her phone away and stood up, matching his intensity now. No, I'm not deleting it, she said, her voice steady but strained. He stared at her in disbelief. Are you serious? You're choosing some post over me? It's not about the post, she shot back. It's about why you're so desperate to hide this. Why can't the world know we're married? Why can't I share this part of my life? She was pleading for an answer, but he had none to give her, not one that wouldn't expose the truth he had buried so deeply. The room grew quiet for a moment, but the tension between them felt like a storm about to break. Javier took a deep breath, as if trying to calm himself, but the fear in his chest was suffocating. Zara reached for her phone again, intending to walk away and cool off, but he was faster. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Give me your phone, he growled. Her eyes widened, shock overtaking the anger. No! She tried to pull her hand free, but his grip tightened. Just give it to me! Why are you acting like this? She yelled, her voice cracking. This isn't you! But in that moment, she realized she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her at all. The calm, protective person she thought she knew had vanished, replaced by someone driven by desperation and rage. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. This was supposed to be our honeymoon. Our fresh start. He didn't respond. His focus was locked on the phone, his entire world narrowed down to that screen and the post that threatened to expose everything. In one swift motion, he wrenched the phone from her hand. You don't understand what you've done, he shouted, his face inches from hers. Tears streamed down Zara's cheeks now, a mix of fear, betrayal, and heartbreak. I trusted you, she whispered. Her words cut through the chaos, but they didn't slow him down. He turned his back to her, frantically trying to unlock her phone, guessing the password as his shaking fingers fumbled on the screen. That's mine, she screamed, her voice hoarse as she lunged for the phone. Stop! But he ignored her. His mind was in survival mode, drowning out everything except the need to make the post disappear. And in that desperate moment, as she fought to take back her phone and he fought to erase the truth, their love story shattered. It was no longer about a picture. It was about remaining unseen, from the authorities, from former victims, and from the web of lies Javier had spun in the past. The person who had once promised Zara safety and love now seemed like a stranger. Her refusal was final. She stood firm, her arms crossed as she stared at him with tear-filled eyes. No, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I won't unlock it. Javier froze for a second, breathing heavily, fists clenched by his sides. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. His fear twisted into rage, hot, overwhelming, and uncontrollable. You're ruining everything! Javier yelled, stepping closer, his face contorted with frustration. Zara instinctively took a step back, creating space between them. Why does this matter so much to you? She whispered, more to herself than to him. He didn't hear her words, only the defiance in her refusal. His world spun with panic, shame, and the terrifying realization that his life was unraveling. And in that split second, he lost all sense of reason. Before she could move again, his hands shot forward. He didn't think, he just reacted, a hard push to her shoulders. Time slowed. Zara's eyes widened in shock as her body tilted backward, her arms flailing to regain balance. The balcony's railing was low, far too low. No! She gasped, her voice a breathless plea as her feet slipped. And then she was gone. The sound of her body hitting the stone pathway below was sharp, final. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that settles when the unthinkable happens. Javier leaned over the railing, his heart pounding in his ears. Zara lay motionless on the stone below, her head at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and growing. No, 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 he whispered, stumbling backward in disbelief, his mind refusing to accept what he had just done. The distant sound of running footsteps and panicked voices began to rise. A couple strolling on the beach had seen the fall and rushed toward Zara. Someone call for help! A voice shouted. More people gathered, their voices a blur of shock and fear. A man knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. His face fell as he shook his head. She was unresponsive. Her life, the life she had fought so hard to rebuild, was gone. Above them, the man who had once vowed to love and protect her stood frozen, his hands still trembling. In that moment, the weight of what he had done crushed him. Javier stumbled back from the railing, muttering to himself. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to. I didn't." But no one would hear those words. The only thing the gathering crowd saw was the lifeless body of a woman who had dared to share her happiness with the world, and the man who had silenced her forever. He was still in shock when the officers entered the suite. Javier sat slumped in a chair, his eyes darting between the balcony and the floor, as if trying to make sense of what had happened. His lips moved, repeating the same words over and over. "It was an accident. She slipped. I didn't mean for this to happen." The officers exchanged a knowing glance. One of them stepped forward. "Sir, we're going to need you to stand up." Javier shook his head, his hands trembling. "You don't understand," he whispered. "We were arguing. It got out of hand." "Stand up," the officer repeated, firmer this time. Slowly, Javier rose to his feet, his knees buckling under the weight of his guilt. Outside, the resort guests had gathered, whispering in hushed tones as paramedics wheeled away Zara's covered body. The once idyllic honeymoon destination had become a crime scene. The authorities began piecing together what had happened. Witnesses stepped forward to share what they had heard and seen. "There was yelling," one woman said. "I couldn't make out all the words, but he sounded furious. I saw her fall," a man added. "She was fighting to keep her balance. It wasn't an accident." These statements painted a grim picture, a confrontation that had turned deadly. The officers placed Javier in handcuffs and led him away, reciting his rights as the crowd of stunned onlookers watched in silence. His attempt at feigning innocence had already crumbled. The investigation that followed revealed the dark truth about the man Zara had married. Javier was not the devoted husband he had pretended to be. He was a professional con artist, a predator who targeted older, financially stable women. Santorini's luxury resorts were his hunting grounds. He would arrive alone but leave with the trust, and eventually the resources, of vulnerable women who fell for his charm and empty promises. His lack of an online presence wasn't a quirk or a boundary, it was a calculated tactic. Without photos or a digital trail, he became a ghost, untraceable by his past victims. But Zara's Facebook post had changed everything. For the first time, Javier's face was tied to a name online. It was the one loose thread that unraveled the web of deceit he had spun for years. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a trove of damning evidence. Phone records showed calls to multiple women, all with stories of romantic getaways and sudden requests for financial help. Financial transactions revealed a pattern: large sums of money drained from accounts after whirlwind relationships. Some women were left bankrupt, while others barely managed to recover. Past victims came forward, their stories eerily similar. "He told me I was his everything," one woman said, her voice shaking. "I believed him until he disappeared with everything I had." Piece by piece, investigators built their case. Each woman's story echoed the same pattern: meet at a resort, fall in love, and watch their lives crumble as Javier drained their accounts and vanished. This time, however, he hadn't disappeared. He had stayed long enough for the truth to catch up to him. In court, the evidence was damning. Zara's Facebook post, the one Javier had feared so much, was presented as the key to unraveling his identity. A post meant to celebrate love had become the proof that exposed his lies. As the stories of betrayal and loss came to light, it became clear that Zara wasn't just another victim. She was the one who had unknowingly brought Javier's reign of deception to an end. For her family and friends, however, no verdict could bring her back. The man who had taken everything from Zara now had nothing left, his freedom gone, his lies exposed, and the weight of justice closing in. The courtroom was packed with Zara's family and friends on the day of Javier's trial. Her family sat in the front row, their grief etched into their faces, silently waiting for justice to be served. Zara's mother clutched a framed photo of her daughter, her fingers trembling as tears welled in her eyes. The trial began with the prosecutor painting a chilling picture of the man who had swept Zara off her feet. "This wasn't an accident," the prosecutor said, pointing directly at Javier. "This was the culmination of a calculated scheme, one he used time and time again on unsuspecting women." The prosecutor laid out the evidence meticulously: phone records, financial transactions, and witness testimonies that illustrated a disturbing pattern of deceit. Javier sat at the defendant's table, his face pale but expressionless. His once carefully curated charm was now a mask of indifference, one that began to crack as the stories of his victims unfolded. One by one, the women he had deceived took the stand. Their voices trembled as they recounted their experiences. "I thought I was the only one," one woman said, her voice breaking. "He made me feel special, like I was the center of his world. Then he vanished, and so did my savings." Another woman, older with a soft-spoken demeanor, wiped away tears as she told her story. "He promised me a life together. He said he loved me. I believed him, and I lost everything." Each testimony painted a picture of a man who used love as a weapon, exploiting trust for personal gain. But it was Zara's story, told through her family and friends, that resonated the loudest. "She was so happy," Zara's best friend said, choking back tears on the stand. "She thought she'd found her forever. She didn't deserve this." As the prosecutor replayed the events leading up to Zara's death, the courtroom grew heavy with silence. Photos from the investigation were displayed: the balcony where their argument turned violent, the Facebook post that triggered his fear, and the stone pathway below where Zara's life ended. The defense tried to argue that Zara's fall was an accident, but the evidence was undeniable. The witnesses who had heard the shouting, the physical evidence from the scene, and Javier's panicked behavior all pointed to a man whose fear of exposure led to a deadly confrontation. When it was finally Javier's turn to speak, he hesitated. For the first time, his composed facade cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. "I loved her." His voice wavered, but the courtroom remained unmoved. The weight of his lies, his crimes, and his ultimate betrayal overshadowed any plea for sympathy. In the end, the jury deliberated for only a few hours. The verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts, including fraud, manslaughter, and criminal deception. The judge's words were firm as he handed down Javier's sentence. "You exploited the trust of countless women, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Your actions culminated in the tragic death of Zara, a bright and compassionate woman who deserves so much more. For your crimes, you will spend the rest of your life in prison." Gasps filled the courtroom as the sentence was announced. Javier's shoulders slumped, the weight of his punishment finally settling in. He was led away in handcuffs, his once confident stride replaced by the shuffle of a broken man. Outside the courthouse, Zara's family and friends gathered to comfort one another. Her mother, still clutching the photo, spoke softly to a reporter who asked for her thoughts. "Zara was a light in this world," she said. "She believed in love, in kindness, and in second chances. She didn't deserve what happened to her. But if her story can help even one person recognize the signs of deception, then her legacy will live on." The story of Zara and Javier became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how easily trust can be exploited. The Facebook post that Javier had so desperately wanted to erase became a symbol of resilience, a testament to Zara's courage in sharing her happiness, even in the face of danger. As time passed, her friends and family worked to honor her memory. They started a foundation in her name to support victims of fraud and domestic abuse, ensuring that Zara's light would continue to shine, even in her absence. For Javier, the man who had lived in shadows for so long, there was no escape. The world now knew his name, his face, and his crimes. And in the silence of his prison cell, he was left to grapple with the weight of his choices and the lives he had destroyed. For us all who had followed the case, her story became a lasting reminder. Trust can be a gift, but in the wrong hands it can also be a fatal risk. The victim's family had every reason to crumble under the weight of their grief. They had lost someone they cherished in the most horrific way, betrayed by the very person who had promised to protect her. But instead of being consumed by their pain, they chose to channel it into action, becoming powerful advocates for change. Zara's sister emerged as a passionate voice for those silenced by manipulation and deceit. Through conferences and online platforms, she spoke about the importance of recognizing the subtle signs of emotional abuse. Her brother, once quiet and reserved, found his strength in supporting organizations dedicated to preventing scams and exploitation. Together, their transformation from grief-stricken mourners to resolute champions for justice became an inspiration to many. But their journey also raised difficult and universal questions. Why do people so often overlook red flags in relationships? Is it because love makes us blind? Or because we can't bear to believe that someone we care about could be hiding something so devastating? At what point does a request for privacy cross the line from a healthy boundary to a glaring warning sign? Javier's insistence on keeping their relationship offline may have seemed harmless, even reasonable. Many value their privacy. But in his case, it wasn't about love. It was about concealing his web of lies. It's easy to judge in hindsight, but how many of us would recognize these signs in our own lives? How many would pause and question if a request for secrecy truly serves mutual trust, or hides something darker? So we ask you, if someone insisted on hiding your relationship from the world, how would you react? Would you respect their wishes, or would you question why your happiness needed to remain a secret? These questions aren't just about one tragic story. They're about trust, boundaries, and the fragile line between love and control. This isn't merely a tale of heartbreak, it's a stark reminder of the devastating impact of lies and betrayal. One simple post, meant to celebrate love, became the spark that ignited a tragic ending. It's a lesson in how the truths we hide, whether out of fear, shame, or selfishness, can ripple far beyond what we imagine. For Zara, those hidden truths brought an end to a life that was filled with hope, resilience, and love. The central theme is clear: trust is fragile. When it's broken, the scars extend far beyond the immediate heartbreak, leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved. We often ask ourselves, how well do I know the people I love? But perhaps the real question is, how much do they let me know them? If Zara's story resonated with you, we want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever overlooked red flags in the name of love or trust? What would you do if someone you cared about insisted on secrecy? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. And if you're drawn to stories that delve into betrayal, hidden lives, and the pursuit of justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Our next story will take you even deeper into the complexities of deception and trust. Another case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned.